everybody. You're very nice and have awful taste. But you're very nice.
You're the man, Frank.
Jeremy, thank you so much.
Security.
For those who are expecting Frank Garman, I apologize. He couldn't make it tonight. Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you for making this possible, because Jeremy was the guy who reached out to me some time ago and said, look, I'm part of this organization. We put together this great Comic-Con in London, Ontario, Canada. Would you be interested in coming out? And the first I ever heard of Forest City Comic-Con, so it was like, let me find out about it. And I went online and I did some Googling, and I said, yeah, that looks like something I want to be part of, so thanks for making it possible.
No, absolutely. We are so happy to have you. One of the traditions we created here last year with Billy Boyd was cooking during the panel. And so the second I mentioned to Ian that you were a Philly boy,
Yes, born
you
and
went
raised.
cheesesteak. Yeah, let's do that. So I told Ralph, we'll be making a Philly cheesesteak for you. And he said, yeah, that sounds great. I was like, no, but seriously, he's a good cook. It's not just us making this is what we assume is in a cheesesteak.
Yeah.
No, we've got Ian's
It's definitely just what I assumed.
Yeah. I saw you cutting some salmon up. That's what worried me. I didn't think, that's bad.
So we met with Ralph quickly this morning, like what needs to be in it, and you gave us the rundown.
Well, here's the problem. It's a very basic sandwich. For those who don't know, the Philadelphia cheesesteak is the official sandwich of my hometown of Philadelphia. And it is basically just thinly sliced meat, beef, and then cheese, and then a roll. And you put that together, and that's why everyone thinks they can make a Philly cheesesteak. But for some reason, it's a very specific kind of meat, and it's a special way they make it, and I'm trying not to be too picky today. I'm going to try this, and I'm going to give you my honest answer. But here's, like Denny's. Denny's makes a Philly cheesesteak. I mean, you can get one. I was at the Gourmet Deli for lunch across the street, and they make a Philly cheesesteak. So I'm just saying, I'm going to give you the real test, okay? I'm going to give you my honest answer.
Mushrooms, yes or no?
No mushrooms, please. No. It's a fungus, for God's sake. There's fungus on their food. It's madness. No, I usually take it.
Sound like Pence with that kind of stuff.
Well, I like mushrooms on pizza, and I like it in like Italian food, but not on my cheesesteaks.
Fair enough.
Okay. It's more than you ever want to know about the cheesesteak, but I'm going to try it. I'm looking forward to it.
It's going to be great. So born and raised in Philadelphia.
Yes.
No Eagles.
Go Birds. That's right. Go Eagles. Champions of the NFL. I know it's all NHL up here, but the NFL down there where I live, it's a kind of important deal.
It is. Yeah. So your old man was in the industry.
More or less, yeah. My father worked in sales, basically. But what he sold, instead of selling shoes, like some guys' dads, or cars, he sold film. He worked for Paramount Pictures in Philadelphia as the branch manager of distribution for Paramount Pictures for the central east coast of the state. So his region was Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, the center of the eastern seaboard of the United States. And he would book the films that Paramount Pictures made, book them into the theater chains in that area of the state. So we were kind of a showbiz family in a town that didn't have much showbiz in it, and my dad would bring home, one-sheet posters and 8x10s in press kits and soundtrack albums. So I was exposed to movies and stuff at a very early age.
What was the ultimate moment that made you decide to move out west?
I wanted to be a performer ever since I was a little kid, and I don't know where that came from. But, sizzling, I like that. Is that onions you got going there? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I remember in kindergarten, is that the thing in Canada you guys have kindergarten? Yeah. I know, because you're like, I say third grade, and you're like, grade 3. I'm like, oh, sorry. But we had kindergarten, and I remember turning a table, a square table, over on its side and grabbing some hand puppets out of the toy box and putting on puppet shows for the other kids. I would do the voices for the puppets and do like an improv puppet show. So I was performing at a very early age, and I decided early on that I wanted to be an actor, primarily. So once I graduated from school, I already had my SAG card. I got that in Philadelphia. I said, I'm going to move to Los Angeles and try to work in television and film.
And that was the gambling addiction after school special.
That was my ABC after school special, where I played the high school football captain who had a gambling addiction. So I tried to get the captain of the soccer team in the high school to shave some points so I could make money gambling on a high school game. It made no sense, but they got me my union card and I became a professional actor at that moment. Yeah.
When you came out to LA, when was the first thing that you noticed started to pick up and stuff started to turn busier for you and you started picking up more work? Was there one moment where you're like, oh, okay, so I've got to run at this?
Well, it was very deceptive because I moved to Los Angeles and my very first audition was for a sitcom that starred Harry Morgan, who was the actor who played Colonel Potter on MASH, if you guys remember MASH at all. After MASH, he had a show called After MASH that was a failure. And then literally it was called After MASH. I said, that's the most just calloused money grab name for a show I'd ever heard. If you like MASH, you're going to love After MASH, and then After MASH. And so that didn't, they should have one called Before MASH, a prequel. And so that didn't go very well, and then he did another sitcom called You Can't Take It With You. And I auditioned, my first audition in Los Angeles was to play his granddaughter's boyfriend. And I got the role. And I remember being in that room, a new kid in town, and looking at all these faces of these other young actors and recognizing most of them, thinking, I have no shot at this. And then I auditioned and I got the part. I was like, show business is easy. I guess you just get a role and you just show up in town and you get one. I'll have a series by Thursday. That was my thought. And it did not work out that way. Many bartending and table waiting jobs later, my first real regular job in entertainment was working on the radio show, working on K-Rock in Los Angeles. I started working on the morning show there. And what was supposed to be a 3-month sort of short stint to take over for some people who had left the morning show there, and I was going to just fill in doing silly voices and celebrity impressions and characters and stuff that I had been doing on stage in a little comedy troupe. It was supposed to be like a 3-month gig till they found a radio professional to fill in and take that job. And then 18 years went by, and that was my career for a long time.
So I've got to ask, in my...
You don't have to ask anything.
No, I can't ask. One of the bits that I kid you not, my family gathers around my phone when I put it on blast is the Bruce Springsteen, which I think is done with a bit.
Your father came up and talked to me about that.
Yeah, that doesn't. He's in tears when he listens to it.
Yeah.
How did Springsteen becoming a raging homicidal maniac? Well, not even just a homicidal maniac with anger issues. How did that even start?
It started like most things have in my career, just out of sheer desperation. And when you do a morning radio show, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, you realize you can run out of material very quickly. And so you start just, you start spitballing, and whatever comes up, you just kind of go with it. And I remember that there was something in the news, Bruce Springsteen, something. Maybe he decided he was going to go on Broadway, but it strikes me that we started way before that. I can't quite remember what he was in the news for. But I do a Springsteen impression because I grew up in Philadelphia, which is right across the river from New Jersey, and Springsteen, he's the king of New Jersey. I don't even know that. He's officially the king of New Jersey. He has a crown and a throne and everything. But he's a god there in that part of the world, so everyone knows Springsteen, and growing up, he was a constant in my life. So I always make my friends laugh by doing a Springsteen impression. So Springsteen, for anyone who knows his work, knows that he can be very long-winded and tell stories about his childhood and stuff on stage. And I always thought that was so funny because the band would be playing the intro to a song, ready to get into it, and he would start with, yeah, I remember back in those days in New Jersey, and I'd be walking on the boardwalk, and I can remember that salt sea air just going over, and people like start looking at their watches, and Bruce just keeps going. Yeah, and I was dating this girl, and she was the prettiest girl I'd ever seen, and we were both 16 years old, and it's going, and it's going. So I always thought it was funny how long he would go on with these stories. So I was doing a segment on the radio, and I used to like to make the guys I worked with laugh and crack them up. So I thought, what would be surprising in one of these long-winded, shaggy dog stories that Springsteen always told on stage? So we had some vamp music going on behind me, and I was talking to the guys on the phone as Springsteen. And I just started launching into this Springsteen story where things go horribly wrong. And it was like, I was walking on the boardwalk, and this bum came up to me and asked me for a handout, and I shoved him. And he hit the back of his head on the railing there on the boardwalk and cracked his skull open, and Clarence Clemens said, that guy's dead. And I realized that we had a corpse on our hands,
I didn't want to go to jail, so Clarence and I got in the back of my '67 Dart and we threw that corpse in the trunk and drove out to the swamps. And I remember just digging a hole to bury the corpse in. And unfortunately, a guy came along with a flashlight and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And I hit him with a tire iron upside his head. Now I'm like, oh crap, now I got two bodies to get rid of. So it just was one thing where what would happen if things went horribly wrong with Springsteen? So that became a running joke on the show where they would say, let's check in with Bruce. And I would start off every story very innocuously, and it seemed like a very normal story, and then things would go horribly south. So the other struck me funny as, what if, in reality, Springsteen had this long line of murders that he had committed and had to get rid of all these bodies.
How did you wind up hosting the Joe Schmo Show?
Interesting story. I was doing this radio show in Los Angeles, and the guy that I replaced on that radio show was the guy who was doing sports primarily for the morning show, but he also did characters and wrote a lot of material for the show and did voices and things. He left the radio show to go do a show on Comedy Central in the States called The Man Show. This guy's name is Jimmy Kimmel. You guys know Jimmy Kimmel? Yeah. So Jimmy left the morning show. Well, I don't know, you guys probably have your own late night shows up here or whatever.
No, we watch yours.
Do you steal ours?
We watch yours.
You guys are like the bad neighbors stealing our cable. That's right. So Jimmy left the morning radio show to go to The Man Show on Comedy Central. So the people who produced The Man Show were familiar with Jimmy and familiar with the morning show because it was all very incestuous. And they came up with this idea to do this thing called the Joe Schmo Show. And for those who don't know, the Joe Schmo Show was a parody of reality television that was basically, the format was one of these reality competition shows, but only one person was a real person on that show. Everyone else involved was an improvisational comedy actor. Now, the guy didn't know that, so all these actors are doing all these crazy things around him while the show is going on, but basically they're performing a play for an audience of one, this one guy. And we wanted to see how outrageous we could get on that show, and then at the end reveal to him what had been going on and give him a big check, hoping he wouldn't sue us. So they were looking for a host of this show. Now, when you're in Los Angeles and you're on radio, you get a ton of people inquiring about, would you like to host fill in the blank? Usually it's a game show of some kind. And I had gotten some interest in that area before, but I never wanted to be Ryan Seacrest, which is stupid because he's very rich. But Ryan Seacrest is a cue card reader. That's what he does. You know, he shows up and he reads the cue cards and he introduces people. And that was fine for him, but I always wanted, if I was going to do television or something, I wanted to do something a little bit more interesting. So I met with these people about this show, and they said, we want you to be the host, and I started to roll my eyes, and they said, wait a minute, this is what the show is going to be. And they started to explain it, and I said, this is crazy, and it just might work. And they said, you get to be the host, but you're also a character on the show, because the host is going to be one of these smarmy Hollywood D-bags who just is going to also be very full of himself, very arrogant. I said, okay, that would be fun to play. So I ended up playing the smarmy host, as he's known in season 1 of the Joe Schmo Show. And it was one of the best experiences of my life.
And it was created by Reese and Warnick.
Rhett Reese and Paul Warnick, who created the show. We did season 1 and season 2 with those guys. And then they dropped right off the planet because they wrote a little thing called Zombieland, and that didn't go anywhere. And then they wrote something called Deadpool and Deadpool 2. I mean, just a horrible, horrible career those guys have had since the end of the Joe Schmo Show.
It's funny, like when I'm sitting down with my girlfriend to watch a movie or whatever, and we still see cast members from the 3 seasons of Joe Schmo in every.
So much talent on those 3 shows. I'll tell you, season 1 had Kristen Wiig. It was her first television job. Kristen Wiig's job was she did Joe Schmo Show, playing a character called Dr. Pat. And she was like the world's worst marital counselor. And she fell in love with a guy named Hutch on the show.
4 marriages or something?
Yes,
like that?
yeah. And Hutch was awful, and of course she fell in love with him because he was awful. He was played by David Hornsby, who later on did a show called It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And then season 2, my personal favorite of all the cast that we worked with, only because he made me laugh so hard, and you guys will probably appreciate this, a guy named Jonathan Torrance was on season 2. Of course, you know him from Trailer Park Boys, but
Gerald.
Gerald, he was Gerald with a hard G. It was spelled Gerald, but he constantly was correcting people saying, my name is Gerald. And he acted very effeminately, but tried to act like he was the most macho guy in the room.
It's something it still holds up, it's great.
But he was the guy who I always knew when I was working with John Torrance that there's every possibility I might crack up during the scene and ruin everything for everyone. I was always worried he was going to make me laugh out loud because that's how funny.
And it seemed like the third season you stepped up in a much bigger way, and you were kind of the guiding factor for a lot of the cast on that one too.
Season 1 was a really good size hit for basic cable in the States, and so they immediately ordered a second season, which was not as good. And I think it was as good, it wasn't as well received, and the ratings were not so good. So they never ordered a third season. And like 10 years later, they said, we want to try and bring the show back again. So they asked me to come on board, and I said, well, I'd already done the first show as myself, basically, as the smarmy host. The second season, I did it with a British accent and fake teeth and bleach blonde hair and a goatee and contact lenses because they wanted to disguise me in case, God forbid, one of the people we picked to fool had seen the first season. We didn't want them to realize what was going on. So the third time around, I said, well, how can we create something new here? And they said, the premise is, instead of you being the host of the show, you're a world-famous bounty hunter. And the game is going to be about you finding the next great bounty hunter to work with you. It's going to be a competition reality show looking for a bounty hunter. And so the guy that we brought in thought he was trying to start a career as a bounty hunter, and we surrounded him once again with all these actors, including the great Lorenzo Lamas, who walked around in a Speedo for the majority of the show, saying he invented a new piece of clothing called the European Man Pouch. It was just ridiculous. And my character was based on, I don't know if he got up here in terms of popularity, but a guy named Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Just assume, like, American entertainment is like Marvel.
Well, I don't need that guy to assume, well, if it's America, you guys must know it.
Yeah.
But Dog the Bounty Hunter always made me laugh because this is a true story that we had a mutual friend, and we both went to this mutual friend's wedding. And Dog the Bounty Hunter was at this wedding, I swear to you, in a tuxedo with no sleeves. Bare armed, in a tuxedo jacket with a tie and everything, and a cummerbund. And in the cummerbund was tucked a pair of handcuffs. I'm not kidding. And I'm like, what, are you gonna run across some perps here at the reception, Dog? Is that why you always have to be ready with your handcuffs? So when we came up with the idea for this character, I said, I will do this, it sounds great, but the only thing I demand, I'm not one of those guys who demands much, but I said, I will never wear sleeves in any scene on any piece of clothing. And at the very end of the show, when we did the big reveal and we gave Chase, Joe Schmo, all the money, they had me come out in a suit. And I came out in a suit with no sleeves on it, so I was bare-armed, and that made me very happy. That made me laugh.
You called yourself the Red Baron.
Yes, I call myself the Red Baron because I have killed more pilots on television than almost anyone else that I know. I have had a long career in television of one-offs, where we film a pilot, and everyone says, that was great, and then that's it. No one ever buys the pilot, and it never goes on television. So I try not to think I'm the kiss of death, but I've had a lot of pilots go down in flames.
Was there one project that you have no idea why it didn't go? Is there one that stands out? You go, that makes no sense to me. That.
Oh boy, I don't know. There were a lot of crappy pilots. I understand why most of them didn't go. We did a sequel to Bonanza, the Western Bonanza. Yeah, I did that one.
No thanks, we already got one.
That's the truth, man. I played Haas's son. Remember Haas Cartwright, the big one? I played his son, and it was Lorne Greene who played the father on Bonanza, and then later played Adama on the original Battlestar Galactica.
Okay.
Actor with white hair,
Almost.
you know? What's that?
Almost?
No, this is the original Battlestar. This is the
Okay.
70s one. Lorne Greene, he was supposed to come back and play once again the patriarch of the Cartwright family in Bonanza. And just before we were about to start shooting, he passed away. And I said, this is bad, a bad omen. This guy wanted to die more than he wanted to be on the show. And we shot it and it did not go well. It was not good. So I can see why that didn't happen. I did a sitcom once about a former NFL player who was a kicker, who ended up being a talk show host. It was called The Kicker, and it was awful. So anyway, no, there's no like missed opportunity where I said, oh, you know, that would have been great to do. I mean, most of them deserved to die. Yes. Yeah. Oh, but Hollyweed is a show, a pilot I did that actually, well, I tried to die, and then someone got CPR and got some paddles, defibrillators, and brought it back to life. But Kevin Smith wrote a TV show called Hollyweed, where he played a guy who runs a legalized marijuana store in Hollywood. And we did that as a pilot, and it failed. But then another company came to him and said, we're trying to start a new thing online where it's almost like Kickstarter, it's a crowdfunding kind of thing, where we show people a pilot, and if they like that show, they say, yeah, I pay for that, and they donate money, and then if we get enough money, we produce more episodes. So they did that with Hollyweed, and that actually will be coming back to life. We're filming more episodes next month. So I've got a character on that who's a former Gulf War veteran who's now, who likes to smoke a lot of weed and has one eye. Smith gave me a patch. I got dressed for the role, and he's like, you look too much like you. And I was like, well, there's nothing I can do about that, Kevin. I am sort of me. He goes, no, wear an eye patch. I was like, that's ridiculous. I'm not a pirate. Why am I wearing an eye patch? And now I'm stuck with it, so I gotta wear an eye patch.
But you also played a pirate. You played Pirate Jack.
I played a pirate in Lavalantula. Not a real pirate, obviously. I played a crappy, out-of-work actor who's trying to make money outside the Chinese theater in Hollywood by panhandling as one of those celebrity lookalikes. So I think I'm trying to look like Captain Jack Sparrow, but I didn't really pull it off. Yeah, that's
Pirate Jack.
Yeah. So I played a pirate, and he had an eye patch too. Come to think of it, yeah. Maybe I should start wearing a patch more often. Oh look! Oh, looks like dinner is served. My goodness, sir! Look at you. I gotta say, looks good. Looks good. All right. How hot is this? Am I gonna burn the roof of my mouth?
Probably not.
Okay. Should I do this?
By all means, if you'd like to, yeah, by all means. See, this came from the idea that we don't eat a whole lot on con days, and so this kind of gives you the opportunity to eat.
Yeah.
Is it okay?
Really good. Really good. Nice soft roll. The meat's done perfectly. The cheese is great. Really good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My
I'm
pleasure.
rude for talking with my mouth full. That's really good. Thank you. All right, I'm done. Good night, everybody. Thank you. Got my sandwich.
Cap's waiting out front. You just take the plate with you.
My wish list. I mean, there's so many superstars that have interesting lives. I'd love to talk to Springsteen. I think that would be pretty cool.
It would be crazy if you
You know, Ralph, I
turn off the
remember.
microphone for a second and just dives into just tell you like you were nail on the head, man.
Yeah, right. Before we start recording, I really did kill all those people. It's crazy. How you knew, man? I didn't know that you knew I was such a murderer. Okay, let's record. I'm just shell-shocked before we get into
Most of the murders were people that didn't have a good interview with.
That's right, yeah.
Good luck to you.
One guy did a podcast and I choked him with his own mic cord.
Paul McCartney, I think, would be cool to interview.
Yeah.
He's a guy who's lived the life, right? He's been through everything. And who else would I like to talk to? That's it, just those two. No, anybody. I mean, I think most people, and I found this true with the Ralph Report when I was doing that, I do quite often as I can, try to get interviews with people who just have lives. You know, one of the most interesting interviews I think I've done was the guy who used to be in charge of moving luggage around at a major metropolitan airport.
Yeah, because there's a bout there where you're just interviewing, like, just email me if you have an interesting job and let's talk.
And I found that there's almost everybody's got an interesting life. You know, if you know what questions to ask, people are inherently interesting. And if you're curious about them and you start a conversation, you'd be surprised what you can get out of them. I talked to a guy who was a window washer. And most people would say, how can you make an interview out of a guy who's a window washer? But then we found out, you have no idea what this guy used to see through the windows while he was washing. Literally. And there were women who would wait for him to come by and then put on a little show while he's washing the windows. I mean, fascinating stuff that you wouldn't ordinarily think automatically, oh, that's an interesting interview. You know?
Yeah. Gotta ask, I'm a huge comedy fan, but Eddie Pence had never crossed my path. He's great. He's a great find for the show.
Eddie?
How did bring him on board come about?
So weird. Eddie and I, Eddie is my sidekick on the Ralph Report, for those who don't listen. Eddie is a stand-up comedian who has, to be honest, and he'll admit it, has struggled. You know, he's had some highs, had some lows, but he's a hardworking journeyman stand-up comic. And this is going to sound shitty, but it's true. When I started doing the Ralph Report, I used to do it by myself. And people started saying, this is great, this is fine and all, but you're much better when you have someone to bounce stuff off of. And I sort of recognize that that's a strength of mine, but I already did that a lot on the radio. I do it with Kevin Smith. I thought maybe this one I should do by myself to make it different in tone from other work that I've been doing. That would be more interesting for people. People said, no, we're not interested in that particularly. They said, we want to hear you talk to someone else. So I said, okay, I can't really afford to pay someone a lot of money, and I need someone who doesn't have much of a schedule and not too busy, because I record this thing at all strange hours, and I need someone who I know and like well enough to work with. So there was a certain criteria of things that had to be met, and the only person I could think of who met that criteria was Eddie, because Eddie's a stand-up comic.
Yeah.
Which meant that if he was working, he was working at night, so he had his days free, so I knew he was available. I knew I liked him and we got along, because he used to hang out, and still does, hang out at the Hollywood Improv, famous comedy club in Hollywood, which is where Kevin Smith and I do Hollywood Babylon almost every week when we're in Los Angeles, when we're not on the road with the show or whatever, because we do it in front of a live audience every week. So we usually work there, and after every show, I would come out and Eddie Pence would be hanging out in the bar, and he doesn't drink. It's weird.
But
we
cream to Beth.
Yeah, we made him drink that. So we would hang out after the show, we'd chat and stuff, so I always thought he was very likable, and I said, this guy would be good. But I didn't know him that well until I started doing this show, and then I found out he's really weird. Which is even more interesting, because I think the audience can hear my genuine shock sometimes where he says, yeah, I don't eat pickles. I'm like, why do you have a hard and fast pickle rule? Who has that? So I'm getting to know him more and more as we do the show together, and he's got a lot of problems.
The duality of the two of you is just fantastic.
I'm often just slack-jawed when I hear from him. He's got a nut list, and they're all ranked, and apparently cashews are way in the bottom, and pecans are even lower than that. I mean, who has a list of nuts? Who bothers to list their nuts? You eat a nut or you don't eat a nut. You don't make a list. Who does that?
No, absolutely. It's the nice part about the Ralph is you're more honest with the audience too. You're blunt, and you don't hold anything back, which is great for you too.
Well, you find out, here's the thing, I lost my job at the end of the year, and I said to my wife, how am I going to earn, you know? I got a kid to take care of, and I talked to some other radio stations in Los Angeles, and there weren't a lot of opportunities at the moment. And I got let go just before the holidays, and I'm literally buying toys for my 8-year-old daughter and thinking, what's my toy budget this year? Because it's different than what it was in previous years. I don't know how long this has to last. And I said to my wife, I don't know how I'm going to earn right now. It was a bit of a panic. And then I said to her, but you know, I've done almost 20 years on the radio, another 8 years with Kevin Smith, and everywhere I go, I meet these amazing people who say, I like what you do. I said, maybe I don't need anyone to give me permission to go to these people and serve that audience. Maybe I can create some sort of direct connection between them. And I found these people at patreon.com, and what they do is a subscription-based service where people literally take their money out and they put it on the table and they say, what you're doing has worth to me, and we're going to pay your salary, and we're going to subscribe to your project. And that's where I started doing the Ralph Report. And those people, you people who subscribe to the Ralph Report, they are hardcore, committed, engaged people who say to me, your work has value to me. And because they do that, I feel obligated to be my best, fullest self to them when I work. And so I've introduced them to my wife and to my kid, and I talk about my real life and my ups and my downs, and it is much more honest, it's much more engaged, it's much more genuine, because they've earned it, because they're amazing. And I thank them. I thank you. If you're one of those subscribers, thank you so much. If you're not a subscriber, you should feel damn guilty right now, because these people are awesome.
So I'm going to stop asking questions. I'm going
Thank God. Oh. Jeremy, we
and we're
thought
just
you'd
going
never
to sit
stop
here for the
talking.
next 15 minutes while you eat the sandwich.
No, let's keep talking. I'm kidding.
And I'm going to run through the audience and let the audience start asking the questions they have, because I'm sure you guys have just as many questions as I do. So, yeah.
Talk loud. That's okay.
Hello, Ralph. How are you doing? As you're just mentioning, and we were talking earlier about this intimate relationship you have with your audience,
Yes.
you know, this tight friendship that goes on.
Mm-hmm.
Two of the
Sometimes
most-
pants off. I'm kidding.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Two of the most, I don't know, critical crises that you've kind of went through in the past few years have been you getting let go from the radio
Yes.
and your experience on the Orville.
Yes.
With the makeup and the claustrophobia.
Yes.
You got quite in depth sharing that with us, those experiences. Is that therapeutic for you? Does it help to get that stuff out, or are you nervous of how your audience might receive this? Because obviously, when something doesn't go successfly, you don't feel great about it, right? There's
No,
a bit
you
of
feel
self-doubt, right?
awful about it.
Yeah. So
And-
yeah.
But I think that is, I don't know how to make any sense out of it, but for me personally, I think that is the most, that's where the commonality happens. That's where people really start to recognize that we're all in the same boat, you know, because we've all had those moments. We've had horrible moments where things go terribly south. And I think people can listen to that and they can relate to that, and that connects us more than me saying, well, I had lunch with Jimmy Kimmel the other day, and who wants to hear that Hollywood BS? It's just, if you're honest with people and if you share with your stuff when you're at your lowest, I think it's when people say, yeah, I feel for you, man. I was there too, you know, and it gets better or it doesn't get better, or how did it get better for you? That's a much more honest conversation. So, I mean, it was the Orville thing. For those who don't know, Seth MacFarlane's a friend because I've done many years of work on Family Guy, and Seth is very loyal, and he brought me in to do Ted. I played the dad in Ted, When the Bear Comes to Life in the Kitchen, that's me. And A Million Ways to Die in the West, and every time Seth has a project, he includes me. And he asked me to do this thing called The Orville, but he wanted me to play the alien bartender on The Orville. It was going to be a regular role on The Orville, and I was going to have it for as long as the show ran, and I'd be a semi-regular. It was very kind of him. But the problem was, this character, Canute, had tentacles and eyes up here, and it was a giant prosthetic makeup thing. And we found out very early on that I am desperately claustrophobic, and I had literally a panic attack on the set. I broke down into tears like a child and had to be helped off the set. It was a total breakdown, and I can't do the role. I couldn't do it. It was the first time I'd ever failed so just in such a big bad way professionally. It was the worst, and I talked about it extensively. You're right, on the Rock Report. And that got more reaction from the listening audience back to me from Twitter and emails and stuff than almost anything I had talked about before, because people were like, well, that didn't happen to me, but I had something where, you know, this happened to me, and or this happened to me, and it's okay, and don't feel so bad, don't beat yourself up, because we all had those moments. And I think that's much more human, I guess, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Being the man of 500,000 voices.
Oh, yeah. Kevin Smith says 8.
Yeah, we're metric up here. So
Oh,
it's a
that's
little
true.
different.
I guess so I couldn't figure out the temperature of my hotel room. It's like,
Yeah.
it's 20 degrees in here? It doesn't feel that cold. Why is it? Oh, F. I gotta push the thing and make it an F, not a C. Yeah.
But with that experience, having done so much in voice acting and impressions, have you ever had any experiences where someone has come up to you that you've done an impression with and either been really positive about it or really negative about it?
You know, it's funny. You said that the first thing that pops into my head was the one person who loved hearing me do him more than anyone else was Adam West. TV's Batman, Adam West. This is one of those stories, like, you know, you really have to, as much as you can, appreciate the magic things that happen to you in life. And I was a huge Batman 66 fan as a kid. I mean, it was my life's blood, and hell, kid, to this day, I mean, still, it's so important to me. Really formed my childhood. And I met Adam years ago, and beyond that, we became friends and co-workers, and I knew his family, and we spent time together. And he was a great man, and a great dad, and a great father, husband, friend. I mean, just the best. So we would often spend time together. He was also the mayor of Quahog, of course, on Family Guy. So even there, we would work together. So we would often find ourselves together. Sometimes in cons, in situations, we do New York Comic Con or San Diego together. Sometimes socially, sometimes in the waiting room at Family Guy, waiting to record. And very often, especially if he was around new people we were just introduced to, he would say, "Ralph, do your impression of me again. Show them how you do that voice. Do my voice." And I'd say, "All right, Adam, here we go. The Joker, you evil, twisted fiend. If you lay one finger on Robin," and I would do a little Adam West, and Adam invariably, stop, wait for it. Adam would turn to that person and go, "I don't sound anything like that." It set me up time after time after time to shoot me down in front of people, and it just made him laugh, and it made me laugh, because I knew it was coming eventually, I got it, I'm not that dense. Eventually I caught on, I'm like, all right, here we go. Some days you can't get rid of a bomb. Yeah, I don't sound anything like that, he would say over and over again. So Adam got a kick out of the fact that I would do him. That came out wrong, I'm sorry. I apologize for that.
Years ago, you talked about you had a Batman cave that your mother made you when you were a child. I wondered if you'd ever do do you still have it?
I don't, sadly.
Oh, could you post up some pictures of it sometime if you still have any or anything? I'd really love to see this thing.
I grew up
It
at
just
a
sounds
time
so
where
nice.
not every moment of a child's life was documented. It's amazing now. My kid's 8 years old. She takes a dump. My wife gets the camera out and she starts taking pictures. Her life has just been documented more than Churchill's life, or historical characters haven't been this followed. I don't even know if we even took pictures of it back in the day. If we did, they were like Polaroids or something that went by the wayside. But yeah, my mom was.
It's a beautiful story. I love that story.
My mom, who has passed on, was a very doting lady, and I was a big Batman fan, obviously. And I grew up in the 70s where there was a thing called Migos toys. You guys know the Migos action figures?
Oh, yeah.
I had all the Batman Migos, naturally, and they came out one Christmas with the Batcave playset. And my mom looked at it. I asked Santa for the Batcave playset. And my mom looked at it and told me after the fact, she's like, "That looks like crap. I wouldn't have my son play with that. That's not the good enough Batcave for my boy," kind of thing. And I didn't know this, but unbeknownst to me, she had taken 2 large cardboard boxes, about the size of, I don't know, what's that, a meter up here? About a meter wide, about a meter tall, 2 of them, one on top of the other. And she spent so much time, this is of course out of my knowledge, putting it together, but she decorated the top box to look like Wayne Manor. And she made little furniture, and she had wallpapered it, and she built this little sliding bookcase that she had taken pictures from the Sears catalog of books from real bookcases and glued it onto it so it looks like a bookcase. And then it slid to one side, and she had 2 curtain rods that went down from the top box to the bottom box, and the bottom box was the Batcave. And she put a linoleum floor in the Batcave, and she put a flap where the Batmobile could drive in and out, and stapled crumpled newspaper to the inside of the box, and then spray painted it gray to look like it was walls of rock on the inside. I mean, my mom could have worked for ILM in terms of the magic special effects she worked on building this thing. And so that was the Batcave that she created for me, and it must have been, I don't know, 5 feet tall, and that was my playset that she made for me, because that's how much she cared. So I often think of, when I think of doting parents, my mom was certainly one of those, and she fostered my imagination and my love for television and that character, and she was always very supportive of my choices to get into entertainment. So I always think of that when I think of her. And I wish I had pictures of it. I would absolutely love to show you, but I don't.
I'd love to see it. I
Yeah,
really would.
yeah, it was pretty cool. Yes, hi.
Hi again.
Hi there.
I was just wondering what inspired you to create Batman 66.
Yes. Anyone read Batman 66 Meets the Green Hornet, the comic book? Well, obviously, as you can tell, I'm a diehard 60s Batman fan. And I got it. I'm so lucky in terms of my friendships in the entertainment industry, obviously. I mean, Seth MacFarlane being one, and then Kevin Smith being also another patron saint of mine who's amazing to me and includes me in everything that he works on, and we love working together. So DC Comics reached out to, well, I guess here's what happened. For a long time, there was no Batman 66 merchandise, and there was no real mention of it in the DC Comics universe because there was a big legal battle going on between Warner Brothers, who owned DC, and 20th Century Fox that owned the series, the TV series, and the Batman 66 movie. So until the lawyers could get together and decide how everyone got paid out of that, no one really did anything with it. Then there was this miracle breakthrough, and I'm just so glad Adam lived to see this moment, but they settled their legal differences, and suddenly there was a glut of Batman 66 stuff out there, merchandise and t-shirts, and they released the series on DVD and Blu-ray finally after years of it not being available. So it was a real sort of golden age for 60s Batman fans. And so everyone was trying to cash in some way, and DC had started a line of Batman 66 comic books. And it was, Jonathan Case was working on it, and who are the other guys? Jeff Parker was writing a lot of issues. And so they thought about the series, and there's a famous series episode where Batman meets the Green Hornet. Batman and Robin meet the Green Hornet in Kato. And for a lot of people, that's known as sort of like the first real superhero crossover on television, even in movies. I don't remember it happening before then. And so DC said, let's write a sequel to that episode since we're doing the Batman 66 line now in our comics. And Batman was owned by DC. Dynamite owned the Green Hornet comic book license. So they contacted them and they said, yeah, we'd be on board. We can combine the franchises. So everything was in place, but they didn't have anybody to work on it. And so DC thought about Kevin Smith because Kevin had written Batman before with Cacophony and Wide and Gyre. And he had also written a never-produced screenplay for a Green Hornet and Kato movie that was never made, that Dynamite took and then made a comic book out of. So literally he had written both characters, and everyone involved said Kevin Smith would be the perfect choice to write this for us. So DC calls up Kevin Smith and says, would you like to write Batman 66 Meets the Green Hornet, the sequel to that famous episode? And Kevin says, I would. He said, but that's not really my Batman. I know it, of course, but I don't really know it that well. Can I bring on board my friend, who I do Hollywood Babylon with, Ralph Garman, because he knows more about Batman 66 than most people ever could. And DC Comics said, can he write? And Kevin said, of course he can write. He can write. Of course he can write. Can you write? I mean, one of those moments where he committed me well before he knew if I could write comic books or not. And so they said, okay, yeah, you can co-write it with him. So Kevin said to me, we're going to co-write this thing. He said, I don't really have any ideas for it. And I said, I've been waiting my whole life to write this. Let me do this, Kevin. So I wrote out an outline and I gave it to Kevin. He's like, yeah, this is pretty good. And I said, well, let me just write the first issue, and then I'll give it to you, and if you have any notes or anything, we'll change it. And he said, all right, great. So I wrote the first issue and I handed it to Kevin. He's like, no, this is good. I was like, no notes? He goes, no, this is good. So I wrote the second issue, I gave it to Kevin. He's like, yeah, this is good. I said, yeah, son of a bitch, he's a genius. I'm doing all the work. I'm writing the comic book. And so I ended up writing all 6 issues of Batman 66 Meets the Green Hornet, and Kevin's name is still on there as writer. And Kevin said, should I not? I was like, no, you got us the gig. This is absolutely a partnership. You opened the door, and I'm just the guy at the other end of the process. And he did read it, and if he did have any notes, once in a while he'd come up with an idea, we'd incorporate it, but it was mostly my baby, because it was like, I don't know, it was like superhero fantasy camp, you know? They had these things like rock and roll fantasy camp where you pay a certain amount of money and you go up and you get to play with real rock stars and pretend like you belong there even though you don't. That was like writing Batman for me, was like, I get to put words in Adam West's mouth. I mean, that was the moment I've been working towards since I was 5 years old. So it was one of the great joys of my life was writing that comic book and writing the sequel to that episode. And luckily, the critics liked it and it sold real well and it was a real success. And people say, would you ever do another one? And I'm like, absolutely, but it'd probably have to be Batman 66 again. I think it's the only thing I'm qualified to write, quite frankly.
Hi, Ralph.
Hello.
Speaking about your emotional connection with your fans and whatnot.
Yes. Are you going to ask me for a kiss?
Maybe.
All right.
Maybe.
Get on up here.
Depends on how this goes. So 6 or 7 years ago, I was in a terrible place, and I had lost all hope. I know comedy make with the yucks, but listening to Hollywood Babylon and the heart and soul that you and Kevin both brought to it gave me hope for humanity that I had lost. So first of all, thank you for that, because I might not be here today if it wasn't for discovering you guys.
Thank you.
And also speaking of long-form interview, would you ever sit down and write an autobiography about your life?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Why not?
I think, no, it's not that I don't want to do the work. I mean, get a ghostwriter, he said. I'm not that lazy. I mean, I could write the book. I wouldn't assume that anyone would want to read it. I mean, well, you're very kind. No, there's 14 of you here that would read it, and sales would not be good. No, I think that's better reserved for people who have lived larger lives, who have accomplished more things than the likes of me. I mean, I've been very lucky and I've done a lot of different things, and it's been very fun ride, and I have no complaints. But I don't know if it's really autobiography worthy. Maybe we'll see. Maybe a little closer to the end.
You also said you weren't accomplished enough to speak with Rob Paulson.
That's true. Yeah, Jay brings up a good point. I did an interview with Rob Paulson recently, the voice of Yakko from the Animaniacs and Pinky in the Brain, and people have been suggesting for a while that we got together, mostly Jay, and he said, you guys should talk. Rob's got a podcast, I've got a podcast. And I would often say, I have no business talking to that guy. He's like at the top of his industry. I do silly voices on Family Guy, basically. I mean, he's better, he deserves a better guest than that. And we did end up talking and had a great time and became good friends. So I guess maybe I do sell myself short sometimes, so we'll see. I don't know. We'll see what the next chapter is, but I don't know if it's going to be a book about my life or not. It sounds so arrogant to say, I'm going to write the book of my life. Shut up. I mean, because I know I often feel that way when I see people write books about their lives. You know, oh, Lindsay Lohan's going to write her own book. Shut up. Who cares? Lindsay Lohan. That's what you call your book that. Call your book Sniff Sniff. I'm going to beef it again.
All right, so we got time for one more question.
One more question. Oh my
And I
goodness.
have just been discussing the food that you made Pensy during the live show, so that's
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
That wasn't my question.
Oh.
I was just going to ask you, we don't have access to DC Universe up here yet.
Really?
But really.
It's on the internet.
I know.
Did they close the internet in Canada? It's geolocked, really? That's insane. Why would they do that?
Canada.
They don't like money.
It's Canada. Not enough money? Well, you got to pay for it in the States. I assume you can pay for it in Canada, too. That's crazy. It's a licensing thing? That's a shame, because that's a really cool thing you guys are missing out on. Sorry. I hope you get it soon. Yes, you're saying DC Universe.
Yeah, well, I was just going to, you mentioned that you've got a show on DC Universe.
Yes.
If you wanted.
Yes, I would like to talk about that because it was a lot of fun to do. DC Universe reached out to me and said, we've got an idea for the fact that we're going to be streaming the majority of the DC Universe movies. Yikes, indeed, yes. But the early good ones, mostly. No, I'm kidding. But like Tim Burton's Batman and Richard Donner's Superman and that kind of stuff. And what we'd like to do is sort of educational doesn't really sell it very well, but sort of like an informative mini-series that kind of talks about, excuse me, cheesesteak coming up on me.
Sorry.
No, it's just a little burp. It was good. Tasted twice. An informative little series where, I don't know, 5-6 minute segments where I talk about the trivia, the making of the film and trivia behind it, interesting stories. And they said, we need someone to host it. Would you be interested? And I said, absolutely. Again, you know, I get offers to host things, and most of the times I say no because it sounds boring, but this sounded like something I would enjoy talking about and doing. So they had me come on, and you will see it eventually when you guys get it, and I'm sure you will soon. It's called DC Universe Presents, and it's me basically. You know, they have those movie channels where the guy comes on before they show the movie and says, "Though this film's from 1957, and Charlton Heston had a massive hemorrhoid the whole time he was filming it." You know, just like interesting behind-the-scenes stories. And that's what I do. And I've done Batman and Batman Begins, Batman and Robin. Sorry, I was kidding when we were filming it. I was like, "Can I just say, and now, watch if you can, Batman and Robin." They wouldn't let me say that. Superman 2. So I did most of the early ones, which is sort of my wheelhouse anyway, sort of the nostalgia when it comes to these superheroes. So I did a bunch of them, and they're up and running now. But it's cool because it's not just me. They've asked other people to step in as well and do some. In fact, Burt Ward recorded a couple, and so they're asking people who have some sort of connection to the DC universe to step up and perform in it, and it's been really fun. The one time I got pissed off at Kevin Smith, I couldn't believe it. Because his daughter, Harley Quinn Smith, is now one of the hosts of their daily informational news show on DC Universe as well. And I think he was a little chap-assed because she was doing that and no one had asked him to be the host of that show. Honestly, God, I think it bugged him a little bit. Because we were getting together for something, and he said, "What's going on?" I said, "Oh, I just had a really good day. I just filmed a bunch of things today." He's like, "Oh, what? What'd you work on?" I said, "Well, DC Universe asked me to host their movie show." And he's like, "Why you?" I was like, "How about congratulations first, Kevin, before the YUs start getting pulled out?" I was like, "Why didn't they ask me?" I was like, "I don't know, Kevin. Can I have one thing, Kevin? You've got a million things going on." So we had fun with that. But yeah, when you guys do get it up here, I hope you will enjoy that as well. Kevin Smith and I, we are like a married couple for sure, yes. If Kevin Smith ever stopped smoking dope, and I ever stopped drinking, I'm convinced that you'd find us killing each other with our arms wrapped around each other's throats. We both do enough of our own drugs of choice just to keep us from attacking each other. Because it's like you spend enough time with anybody and you start that bickering sometimes. But no, we're in good shape.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have today.
What a fun thing. Thank you so much for having me.